Hi, I'm Lindee Goodall, Lindee G Embroidery. I'd say welcome to my sewing room, but we're actually in my dining room. Today I'd like to show you some fun things that you can do with redwork or quilting style designs. Now I love these kind of designs because they are so versatile. You can do so much more with them. They're not heavy and they're not filled in. They don't take a lot of time to sew. And what we're doing here is I've used one design from this new collection, Quilted Corners, which has 11 designs on it in 3 different sizes. So I've used the medium size design here and I've enlarged it just a bit, and this is the actual design here. The colors that you see in here are actually ink, and that's what I'm going to show you how to do today. We're just going to ink this in. Now I have sewn this through 2 layers of batting, and in a previous video I showed you how to quilt in the hoop. We're not actually quilting in the hoop all the way through to the backing on this one because this was intended to be a pillow, and then I changed track in the middle and it became a wall hanging. So you won't see any quilting on the back. So I've used a little bit different thread on this one. Instead of using 40 weight rayon or polyester embroidery thread, I've used this Sulky Blendable thread, and this is a 30 weight cotton. You can see that there are multiple colors here on the spool, but it gives some variation in the design, and it's kind of hard to see once I've inked it in, but you'll see it on this next version. So here is my design, and that's the one that's on the disc that you'll see. I've enlarged it just a tad, and here I repeated it. So I've mirrored it once this way across this axis, taken those and mirrored them down this way. Now I did do this in software, and I highly recommend having a good editing program. You don't necessarily need to learn how to digitize, but getting familiar with software that lets you mirror or merge or take away layers is great, and there are a lot of good ones out there. Check out the Designer's Gallery from Babylock. There's a lot of good programs in there. Now I picked my size based on the size of my pillow and also the size of my hoop. So if you have a small hoop, say a 5 by 7 inch hoop, you're going to not be able to quite sew this one, just a little bit smaller, and you're going to have to re-hoop 5 times. Once for each corner and once for the center. Now this center piece is this part right here. And I used editing software just to crop that out and enlarge it and place it right there in the center because it just looked kind of blank there to me. Now if you have a larger machine, larger sewing field, this is the 200 by 300 hoop on the Babylock Illissimo, and you can see that I can fit half of the design in here. So I only have to sew it twice. Now when you do designs and you're thinking about how big your sewing field is, don't max out the whole sewing field because you need room to move that design around to get it lined up. This machine has a special feature with a built-in camera, and it will line up that design for you, but it needs space to move it around. So the next step is to do the inking, and that's actually easier than you might think. We're just coloring in the lines. So if you know how to color in a coloring book, you can do this. I've sewn out another version that we're going to work on, so we don't have to take so long. And I've sewn it out in a darker color to make it easier for you to see. And this is the design that we're going to ink. So here we are, we're ready to ink. I have some Tsukineko inks, and I have some rose, and I have some green, and I have some white. And these are all mixable. They work with these nice little paint sticks. So if you're not fond of using a brush, you can use these little paint sticks. They are a little flexible on the end, so they're more like a brush than, say, a pen. You can also use brushes. So I'm going to use this fine tip brush for the really skinny areas on my design. You'll also need some aloe vera gel. And you want to make sure that you get the clear kind, not one that's colored. I found this at Walgreens near the suntan lotion, so you can find some there. Brand doesn't make any difference, but you want it as plain as possible. We're going to use this as sort of a medium with our inks. This will allow us to tone down the intensity of the ink and also give it some body. I'm working with a dry technique here, and it makes it much easier to control the inks when you're working dry and with the gels. Now I use a measuring spoon. I just use a teaspoon here, and I measure out a dollop of the aloe vera and count the number of drops using an eyedropper to put in the ink. Now in the interest of time, I'm not going to show you that part. I'll use something like a palette knife This is just an artist palette knife that I happen to have to mix, or you can use a little stick or some sort of thing to mix with. I don't need to do any preparation for my fabric. I do have cutaway behind this. Now on my original piece I had 2 layers of batting, and so I wasn't worried about ink soaking through to the back side. If you're working on just fabric, you might be worried about that, so you might try using a piece of mat board or cardboard with a couple layers of paper towel on it, so that makes a nice work surface for you to work on. And to start, you're just going to pick a color and you're going to work from the inside out. Now we don't really have too much of an inside here, but on my big project I worked from these center points out to the outside. That way as you work from the inside out, you're not getting your hand in it. It does dry pretty fast, so that's not a big deal. And you can test your colors. So what I like about using the measuring system is that it makes it easy for you to trial colors. Now this is pretty light here, and in fact we can hardly see it, so I'm going to add another drop or two to my ink. I have 2 shades of the red going on here, so I'll just add, we'll do 2 drops. Now this is water cleanup, but I don't recommend it getting on your clothes. Just why we're dressed so casually today. So we'll just mix that up a little bit. Dab our little Fantastix stick in there, and we're just going to rub it on. Now these big areas are nice to start with because it will give you a feeling of how it works. And you can see that I kind of went over into that other area. This is going to be darker. And since these blend very nicely, I don't have to worry, as long as I'm using the same tint, that I got outside the lines. Now if you do happen to go outside the line, let's say you get outside the line there a little bit, you can take another clean paint stick, Fantastix, dip it in some just plain aloe vera, and just kind of blend it into your fabric. See how forgiving that is? So you're just going to keep inking. When you get ready to do the darker, you can put the darker on. And you can just keep building up the layers. It is a little bit darker when it's wet, so it will lighten slightly as it dries. When you're done, you just heat set it with an iron. Sometimes when you're working wet into wet, like you wet your fabric and you're working on things, you don't want things to blend, so you'll do 1 layer, heat set it with the iron, and come back and do some more. So in the really thin areas, you might try using a brush. And you'll just continue working along till your project is done. Now it's easy, but it does take a little time, takes some patience. So just allow yourself plenty of time to work. If you run out of time, you can always cover your palette with some saran wrap or plastic wrap and it will keep. You can, if it starts to dry out, just add a couple drops of water and you can mix it up. So that's just how easy it is. I hope you'll give this a shot because you can add some really interesting effects to your embroidery and have some really unique things that no one else has.